So shortly I'm going to be joined by someone who wants to remain anonymous, but has generously agreed to let me share his story. So when he was younger, he made a split-second decision behind the wheel that ultimately led to a crash, and he lost his license. He now faces an extended driving test to get it back. The conversation isn't about judgment, it's about learning and honesty and really understanding what can happen when things go wrong after you've passed your driving test. So, how old were you when you passed your driving test, and how soon after did you crash?
I think I was early 20s, 21, 22.
How long after you were passing did you crash?
It was in my first year. It was probably between 6 and 8 months after I passed, I think.
So fairly early.
Yeah.
So at the time, how would you have described your driving skills?
When I first passed, I don't feel like I was ready to go out and drive on my own. I think probably a lot of other people get that as well. But I didn't. Within the first sort of few months, I thought, oh, I've cracked this.
So what happened? Can you talk us through the day that it happened?
Yeah, I was on my way to work. I came to Beamsley Hill, I think it was. There was a lorry in front of me. Went out and I checked to see if anything was in front, was anything coming, but I wasn't looking at what was in front of the lorry. And there was another van in front of the lorry, and I hadn't realised. I thought, I'll go round the lorry. So I go for it, and then I've realised, obviously, I've got a bit further I need to go because there's a van in front of the lorry.
Right.
There's a bend, a sort of shallow but blind bend approaching at the end, and it's 2 lanes on that side, and because there's another car coming up overtaking on the other side of the road.
Right.
And then at that point, I've quite viciously pulled the steering wheel to get in, and then I've tried to sort of correct it, and then that's when the back end of the car just sort of came out, and then I sort of went over on the verge.
Right.
And the car rolled. So when the car was sort of rolling over, it was quite, it was quite scary. To be fair, I thought I'm dead here.
Yeah. With that kind of speed.
Yeah, exactly. So ambulance came. I wasn't injured, but the ambulance came. Police came. I was in the back of the ambulance, and they put me on a spinal board anyway. And then the policeman came into the back of the ambulance and took a statement from me. Told him, briefly what I did. I went to Keighley Hospital. They checked me over. My missus came to pick me up. Got a court date, and it was for quite a few months after the accident. And then I had to go to Skipton. First of all, I had a police interview. I had to take a solicitor to that. They interviewed me. Then I got the invite to court. I went to court once. We went over the evidence and stuff with my solicitor, and then I went for a hearing the next time. And then basically, when I was going through the evidence with my solicitor, she just said, to be fair, it was like they had a dash cam footage of someone behind me who'd seen me do the manoeuvre but not seen the actual crash. So they had that as evidence, and my solicitor basically just said, nothing you can do really. Just be apologetic, say sorry. And to be fair, I was sorry. I didn't want to crash. I didn't mean to drive like that, and I didn't really think of what the implication was of doing that either. It was just stupidity, and like I said earlier, complacency.
So what was the outcome from the court?
I got 20-month ban, 80 hours of community service, and I had to retake the extended test.
And then you got the expense of going to court.
Yeah, so I paid about £900 in solicitors' fees in total.
And how did the crash affect your life and your family? How long has those?
So I was living over sort of in Preston at the time, because I took a job over there. It meant that I had to find a public transport means of getting to work, plus a bike. It was painful. It took me ages to get to work and back. I was often late, and I had to obviously rely on public transport, which is dreadful at the best of times. Generally, it's just very inconvenient, and
You mentioned the other day it affects your job
yeah. So
prospects.
obviously, in terms of what I do, I work in sales. Most well-paid sales jobs, professional sales jobs now require you to have a driving license. You need to be able to go and see customers. It's written into my contract I'm supposed to hold a full, clean, valid driving license.
Right.
I've negotiated with my company that I'm doing it currently, but I can't be doing it forever.
So what motivated you to get further training with me before taking your test, and what aspects of that training have you found most helpful?
So the reason I wanted to get more lessons was, first of all, it'd been a long time since I've driven. For me, if I was put in front of an instructor and told to do the extended test, which is double the length, task which is probably requires a lot of preparation for, I thought the best thing to do would be to get some additional tuition to help me to iron out things like bad habits, get me back into the swing of driving again, and make me feel sort of more comfortable behind the wheel. And I can certainly see the difference now, because from our first lesson, I was sort of very nervous to drive. I didn't have a grasp of the size of the car, what gear to be in, when to go, when to stop. And I think now, as we've gone on, I feel like, especially after our lesson today, I feel like I'm a lot more comfortable and a lot more confident driving.
I think the biggest change I've seen is your ability to look a lot further ahead.
Yeah.
And plan and anticipate a lot further down the road, which initially was catching you out a little
Yeah, I was
bit.
always looking at what's directly in front of me and not, not planning
picture.
ahead.
So that's really good.
This picture's done.
So if you could go back, what would you say to your younger self?
Don't overtake. No, I think it's just, when you first pass your test, a lot of what you've learned just goes out the window. Once you pass, you pass. It's not about driving safely. It's about showing your mates your car and getting to work and doing things. It's not, I think maybe a lot of things get forgotten. And for me, I always wish that I'd just sort of been, well, first of all, I wish I'd learned more about what the rules of the road are. I wish I'd experienced more situations as well, But up to that time, I'd never, in a lesson or an educational setting, I'd never done an overtake. I'd never gone on a motorway. I'd never, there's a lot of things that I'd encountered while I was driving that I didn't know how to cope with or handle, and I made it up as I went along. And there's also a lot of things which I probably did handle in an educational setting, and I ignored what I'd learned, or I'd forgotten it.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of people pass their driving test and think, great, that's me, I can drive.
Yeah.
Rather than actually, this is the
this
is the minimum standard for you to be able to continue to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
By yourself, rather than you now do what you like, kind of thing. I think
for me as well is like, everyone says that. Everyone that I've spoken to says, I've said, I've got to do my extended test. They're like, you'll be fine. Just got to get out your bad habits. Everyone says that, and it's like, well, there's a lot more than bad habits. It's not about just making sure you're looking in your mirrors and doing this, that, and the other. It's about remembering that. Well, overall, it's remembering how to drive safely and by the rules.
And your responsibility with everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. And there's, like I said before, there's not a lot of people that I know that have been upside down in a car. And
you don't recommend it?
No, certainly not. And I think also that if those people had, then they would be, they'd probably be a bit different in their driving attitude, I guess.
Yeah, so your attitude's changed massively.
100%. I think about safety first now. I try and drive under the speed limit and make sure that I'm not endangering anybody, and I'm not endangering myself or you or And I've got a 7-year-old now. I can't drive like a
responsibilities.
If I'm going to be driving around on my own with a kid in the car, I've obviously got to make sure that I'm
and protecting everyone else's kids in their car.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly, I'd like to say thank you for sharing your story.
Okay.
Really appreciate it, and hopefully, some people will take something from it.
Just don't tell anyone my name.
No. All right. Thanks very much.
No worries.